So that's the point of keeping Susie's character on the show. So she could be possessed by the spirit of Shauna, or whatever spirit that was, to do evil stuff and become an evil demon child. That does make Susie very similar to the Karen Clancy character I mentioned in my last video, or the video before that. In the old Swamp Thing series, one of the old series, there was this little girl who was involved in Swamp Thing's life, who was like basically a demon from another world, or a conduit for it. Her name was Karen, and she was a little blonde girl who looks very similar to what Susie looks like, who has been possessed by a spirit to become an evil demon child, at least for like this episode in Swamp Thing. 2, it seems like kill Maria. That failed because Swamp Thing saved her. And again, while this is a good show, the Swamp Thing saving Maria does highlight, I think, probably a big problem with it, and why I think people at AT&T and Warner Brothers might have a problem with it. And that, it's an episode where Swamp Thing shows up, does something, you never see him again. It's kind of like he's a supporting character in his own show, almost, or just one of the regular, ensemble characters and not the main, center of it. Which might be what I've been saying in previous videos, a reason why this show isn't going over as well with the top brass. I don't know that. No one has said anything to me. It's just a theory I have. But the Swamp Thing bits we got were good. I mean, the whole show is good. It's just a different type of show. I like those. Some of my favorite parts of the episode, one of my favorite parts of this episode was when we did see Swamp Thing. He was talking, he was having a scene, just like the regular other characters. It would be nice to see more of that. And maybe that's what the executives were thinking. It would be nice to see more of Swamp Thing in his own show. But speaking of that, we did see him interact with, and I was shocked, the Phantom Stranger. I was like, that's the Phantom Stranger? I read the comics, and, in DC Comics, the Phantom Stranger looks very different than he looks on this show. He's like a tall guy. Well, this guy could be tall. He was sitting in a boat the whole time. But he's this tall guy in a black outfit, a long black coat. He has on a black hat, and usually his face is obscured in shadow. Or just a black hat. I'm not very good with fashion and describing it in detail, but Phantom Stranger has a classic look this character didn't have. Although the Phantom Stranger is very powerful, so he has the power to make himself look like other people when he wants. And one thing I noticed is in the description of this series episode, it doesn't say that Swamp Thing encounters the Phantom Stranger. It says he encounters a Phantom Stranger. So is there supposed to be more than one Phantom Stranger? I read a lot of DC Comics. Have they changed things where there's different people taking that role? Because I always thought there was just one dude who was the Phantom Stranger. So maybe they changed it in some comic I didn't read yet, where there's multiple Phantom Strangers. Like they're creatures, or, beings, sentient beings, mystical, supernatural beings who do things. There's not just one. Interesting concept. Or maybe that was just a typo in the way that person wrote the episode description. Interesting, though, how in this episode, the Phantom Stranger introduces or is starting to help Alec understand that he hasn't just been, biologically and scientifically changed into a plant creature. He's connected to the supernatural. And he says the trees, have a story or something like that. And I think he's referencing or introducing the Parliament of Trees to the show. And in the comics, the Phantom Stranger was not the one who helped Alec Holland or Swamp Thing understand he was a supernatural being. That was actually John Constantine who did that. But this John Constantine's not on this show, so I guess they've kind of swapped him with the Phantom Stranger. They're having the Phantom Stranger do what John Constantine did. John Constantine did a lot of other things in the Swamp Thing comics, but one of them is, he was starting to make educate Swamp Thing on his supernatural powers. And it's fitting that they chose the Swamp Thing, because the Swamp Thing would have his own, backup tales. And because it's fitting that they use the Phantom Stranger. Because in the old Swamp Thing comics, the Phantom Stranger would have his own backup tales in a lot of Swamp Thing's issues. And they would cross over, too. So I think this is kind of a callback or kind of a nostalgic, nod to the fans. The people who read those old Swamp Thing comics and know that the Phantom Stranger actually played a role in the Swamp Thing series, in some of the old Swamp Thing comics, not all of them. And I noticed that because I read a lot of those old Swamp Thing comics. But this was such a good episode. I loved, seeing, it's a horror show. It's got a lot of that atmospheric horror kind of going on. Similar, this is produced by James Wan, so it's fitting. I was going to say similar to The Conjuring, which, is a James Wan horror franchise. So it has kind of that same, kind of atmospheric, slow build kind of thriller kind of supernatural horror as opposed to the whole slasher kind of horror. Although there is some gory stuff that happened in Swamp Thing, the show doesn't really rely on it being a gore fest. The gore, or whatever blood you see, comes up when it's necessary for the plot. And I like the climax of the show with Maria and Abby, facing off or whatever, being terrorized by, whatever, the spirit of Shauna, the twisted spirit of Shauna in the lake, and how, that confrontation, was part of, it was linked to the drama that's going between those two characters. Abby blaming herself for Shauna's death, Maria being angry with Abby and, resentment and bitter towards her for killing her daughter, and how the horror is a part of it, comes out of that organically, right? That's what makes the horror in Swamp Thing different than a Jason Voorhees kind of horror show where there's just a slasher or whatever. It's more dramatic and emotional and atmospheric, and I like that. And I like, they put it at the end of it. This is a really good show. It's sad that it's ending, but I think I do understand now why it's ending because of the reasons I said before about the style of the show. It's just doesn't align, I guess, with what they want. But it is a very good show. And I thought that when they revealed exactly what happened between Abby and Shauna when they were younger, it didn't seem that bad. I understand any parent will probably blame, my child is dead, you were there, it must have been your fault. Even though it wasn't exactly like that. She was dragged away by something, but Abby's the one who shoved her into the water in the first place. But I don't know. It didn't look like Abby was being malicious or anything. So it almost wasn't really her fault. And I'm sure the writers made it that way because if they had... Abby's supposed to be the main protagonist of the show, and they want the audience to like Abby. So they can't write her as being this horribly evil teenager, or else that'll make people not like her as an adult. So they couldn't have her be really killing Shauna, or else members of the audience might turn on her. They had to make it be where it was kind of like a misunderstanding or whatever, or she blamed herself for something that wasn't really her fault. At least that's how I interpreted that scene. I didn't really see it as really her actually killing that girl, but I don't know. Other people watching this episode might think differently and think it was totally her fault. I didn't, though. Sheriff Cable is turning out to be a much darker character than I thought she'd be. When she killed that guy who threatened her son, and she's also having an affair with Avery. I didn't really know what they were going to do with her character when the show started, but it does seem like she's very much a gray or not necessarily, a good guy kind of character. When the show started, I thought she was going to kind of be a good guy character, but they're definitely making her character, I think, murkier in her morality and her character motivations, which I think is interesting. I'm very curious to see what they plan on doing with her as the show progresses too. I mean, what the writers plan for her character story arc to be as the, kind of sort of good or not so good sheriff in town. She's not completely evil, but she's not completely good either. And so I'm wondering, what they plan on doing with her as, this series progresses, or this season progresses. Swamp Thing's not going to get more than this season, so I guess we'll find out over the course of the next 5 episodes. And last but certainly not least, the character I want to get to last in this review is Dan Cassidy, aka the Blue Devil. They're starting to take us somewhere with his character to advance his character forward. Before we had him talking to Madame Xanadu, referencing something that was going to happen to him or that he was trapped 2 or 3 times to set it up. And now it looks like they're starting to actually take him somewhere. He tries to leave the town. They actually show us why he's trapped here, at least physically. There's some mystical barrier that he can't go through without burning himself his hand. But then when he goes to try to save Maria from those guys Avery sent to scare her, he gets knocked out. And I think him recovering from that, what's going to happen is him recovering from getting knocked out, or trying to bounce back from the trauma. Something's going to be triggered and he turns into the Blue Devil, or maybe either something physical, or maybe he'll have some kind of vision or whatever at this instant right now, trying to recover from this wound or whatever, and he'll turn into the Blue Devil. We saw the outfit in his trunk. I think that's the first time we've seen the outfit physically in the show. I think we saw pictures of him on a poster, or maybe I'm remembering something else wrong, but I don't think we've ever seen the outfit yet. But I think next episode or the episode afterwards is probably going to be his Blue Devil transformation. And it'll be cool to see Blue Devil and Swamp Thing team up. Maybe Blue Devil, Swamp Thing, and the Phantom Stranger team up to fight evil together. Wouldn't that be cool? But good episode. Can't wait to see where it goes next. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like it on YouTube and subscribe to the channel because I appreciate your viewership, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.